Jovan, Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to another Lakers postgame reaction show. Just got back from the Golden One Center here in Sacramento, where the Lakers won 113-100 to win for the third time in 4 games, to improve to 15-12, and to jump from 10th in the Western Conference all the way up to 7th in the Western Conference, which just shows you how jumbled the West standings are right now and how every game can make a significant difference. LA's technically tied for 6th right now. Denver just has a slight edge in terms of percentage points. What's up, everybody in the chat? I see you all starting to populate. Shout out to the late night gang. It's about 11:15 on Thursday night, so I appreciate you all for rocking with me tonight. A lot to get into because this was a really good win for the Lakers. As Puppy Chow said, I don't want to continue to say that each progressive win is better than the next, and I still think the Memphis game, just based on how well Memphis was playing, I would probably put that one ahead of this one. But LA has not been a good road team this season. This is a team that has had their number for a couple of years, particularly with the AD Sabonis matchup. And I think LA pulling this one out, there was a couple moments there where it looked like Sacramento was potentially going to pull away. They went on several runs in the first half. They took the lead momentarily in the third quarter. And then even in the fourth quarter, it was pretty close until LA eventually pulled away over the final few minutes of the frame. So I think, JJ Redick said that this was arguably his favorite win of the season. And I think it's up there. I think I would probably say it's their best road win of the season. Certainly the couple of San Antonio games are right there as well. But I think it's in that conversation. I would still say for Puppy Chow, that the Memphis win was better. And I'm not saying this was the best win of the season, but certainly one of the best wins of the season. And I would say, again, one factoring in the quality of the opponent, the context of everything, this is right there in terms of one of their better wins since the beginning of the season, when they started 3-0 and then eventually 10-4. But before we get into the 3 takeaways from tonight, you guys know the drill. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. So for me, the first takeaway is going to be the Lakers have had the league's best defense over the past 4 games. And it's a 4-game sample size, which is a drop in the bucket for the regular season. But this is a group that has largely struggled defensively this season. Still on the season, the offense has been better than the defense. But these past few games, partly with the break and guys, I think, them being able to make some tweaks defensively with the rotation, with the scheme, and guys just getting a bit rejuvenated and rested, we've seen a different level of defense from the Lakers. So they have a 98.5 defensive rating, which is elite. That's like, especially in modern times, that's like about as good as it gets realistically. And again, I don't expect this to keep up the rest of the season, but we are seeing a different defensive ceiling from this group. And I think, of course, it starts with AD. Tonight had 9 stocks, 6 blocks, and 3 steals. But as a team, the Lakers had 9 blocks and 9 steals. And just looking at the box score here, Max Christie had 2 steals. Austin Reeves had 3 steals. D'Lo had a steal. And then with the blocks, LeBron had a block. Had a really nice chase down block. I believe it was on Keon Ellis in transition. Or early offense. D'Lo also had a block. Then Christian Coloco had a block. So LA has these past 4 games, in 3 of the 4, they have held their opponent to 100 points or fewer, which, as I've talked about on here many times, like the 100-point mark, you kind of walk into it in 2024 with the way that offenses function with 3-point shooting and paint scoring. And like, I just think that the Lakers have been operating at a level that I didn't know, like a gear that I didn't really know they had defensively. So I think a lot of credit goes to JJ Redick and the coaching staff and some of the tweaks they made with playing a little bit more drop coverage, being a little bit more selective with the switching. I also think moving Max into the starting lineup and just playing with the rotation a bit to kind of figure out what's been working. But then, AD, of course, is AD, and I think he's been better defensively during the stretch. But I think Max Christie tonight, again, holds De'Aaron Fox to 7 of 17 shooting. And there was other guys, Gabe, Cam, that got some cracks at him. But I thought Max did a really good job, again, holding an all-star level guard to, a below average performance. Gabe came in and was effective defensively. He had 4 fouls, but I thought he was playing physical and being disruptive. Also hit some big threes offensively. Cam, I thought wasn't as sharp defensively as he had been in some of the previous games, but still was being a bit disruptive and picking up fouls. And I think sometimes, especially for this Lakers team, who can be a bit passive, who can sometimes have performances where they don't foul defensively because they're being they're getting blown by and not rotating and kind of botching their communication and their assignments. Like sometimes for me, seeing a team foul, and especially a team that has been open about like not necessarily having a lot of stoppers and trying to rely more on their team defense, I think them fouling and being more aggressive and physical is a positive thing. So I mean, the Lakers defense, again, like Sacramento entered the evening as the 7th best offense in the league. Looking at the last, so JJ, I didn't realize this until JJ said it pregame, but JJ said over the previous 9 games, the Lakers were 11th in the league in in defense. And I went and looked at that and just was curious with Sacramento kind of what their metrics were, and they were 2nd in offense over that stretch. So looking at the Lakers defense trending up, Sacramento's offense has also been trending up recently. And to have LA hold them to 100 points, all 5 starters for the Kings did score in double figures, but it was a performance that was very much condensed to Sabonis, Monk, and Fox. I just thought, again, based on the way that largely the same personnel as last year, and Sacramento swept the 4 matchups, right? And the season before went 3-1 against the Lakers. So for LA to conquer this demon earlier in the season and then go into their building and I would say, win even more decisively, I just think it shows the progress that this group has made, and especially defensively, just the rhythm and the zone that they've been in on that end. And I think, again, AD has been AD, but I look at the perimeter defense from Max, Austin was good tonight in the passing lanes, Gabe, Cam, like I just feel like everyone's been, and even LeBron, he had that closeout in front of the Lakers bench on DeMar DeRozan, Rui guarding smaller guys. So like everyone's kind of been chipping in, and then D'Lo, again, a block and a steal, like he can be a playmaker defensively. So I just, the defense has been awesome. And I will say the one concerning thing within that stretch is the Lakers have the 30th ranked offense over the past 4 games. So not to rain on the parade too much, but like obviously you're not going to have a lot of success with the 30th ranked offense. And part of it, like one of the wins was against Portland. And so like that said, they beat Memphis, they beat Sacramento on the road. So overall, this has been a really good and impressive stretch, particularly on the defensive end. But the offense has been concerning for quite some time now. Even tonight, shot 40% from the floor. It was an oddly officiated game. I think in both cases, like at first, it felt like the Kings were getting more calls than the Lakers. It eventually shifted in their direction. But like it felt like there weren't as many fouls as like I want to say the Memphis game. if I'm remembering it correctly. But there was a lot of shooting fouls in this game, so it was kind of oddly officiated. Like the physicality was allowed, but then it was like anytime someone was in the paint or taking a shooting opportunity, that that's when they would call a foul. So I mean, both teams shot 22 plus free throws, so it wasn't. I think it was slightly in the Lakers' favor, but I don't think it was like a dramatic thing that necessarily swung the game. But I thought it was noteworthy that really in both cases, like I felt like there was a lot of ticky tacky shooting fouls that benefited both teams. But aside from the free throws, LA did a really good job taking care of the ball in offensive rebounding. I'll be getting into that with a later takeaway, but just to summarize, like the recent defense, I think with Portland, it's Portland, so you don't want to draw too many conclusions. But then to go to Minnesota, hold them under 100 points, to then come back and play Memphis and beat them with how hot they were at the time, and then to now have this performance in Sacramento. And I know the Kings are under 500. They've had a bit of an odd season. They haven't been playing as well recently, so maybe this doesn't hold as much weight as it did, say, beating them last year. But they're still a talented team. I mean, they added DeMar DeRozan. The fit is a little awkward, but still, I mean, they got Sabonis, they got Monk, they got Fox. Like, they have a lot of the same characters that hurt the Lakers in years past. So I thought this was a really solid win, one of LA's best wins of the season, certainly in the conversation for best road win of the season, and just another, I think, step in the right direction for this group in terms of righting the ship and getting into a good place in the standings and just in terms of where they are in the league right now. Second takeaway for me was AD outplaying Sabonis, and AD finally beat Sabonis for the first time in the third game of the season. But if you remember from that game, Sabonis had a 29-point triple-double. I think AD had like 31, 33, but he was in single digits in rebounding, single digits in assists, and the plus minus, I think it was like plus 11 for Sabonis, minus 22 for AD. So you had a 33-point swing there in terms of their impact on the court. And it's not directly a one-on-one stat, but those guys largely are playing at the same times based on how the JJ and Mike Brown are running their rotations. So even with AD finally getting the win in the third game of the season, remember that was the game where LeBron went supernova. I think he scored like 16 straight or something like that to start the fourth. So LeBron, and he had a rough game up to that point, but then LeBron took over, finishes with a 30-point triple-double, and he was the sort of hero of the game, the player of the game. But AD tonight improves to 2-10 against Sabonis, and like I will say, Sabonis I think bothered him defensively because AD finished with 7 to 20 from the floor, so did not have an efficient offensive night and seemed to me, just the struggle in terms of guys reaching in and just some of his finishing in the paint. But overall, finished with 21 points, 18 rebounds. Did have 20 to finish the game, but had 2 offensive rebounds taken away from him after the game, which I can't recall seeing 2 rebounds taken away. Sometimes they'll tweak one stat, but 2 is a bit excessive, but whatever. He finished 21 and 18, and again, 6 blocks, 3 steals. Lakers were plus 19 with 80 on the floor, whereas Sabonis had 18 points, 12 rebounds, 9 assists. So did almost have a triple-double, was 8 for 12, was more efficient, but was a minus 16 on the floor with, again, a lot of those minutes coming directly against AD. So I thought that in terms of holding his own against Sabonis, I thought this, he was more disruptive defensively. Again, offensively, he had a bit of an off night. AD hasn't quite been himself recently offensively outside of a couple of performances, but I thought AD really was leveraging his defensive abilities well against the Kings backcourt, and LA played a bit more drop coverage and funneling the Kings guards into AD, where he could then be a playmaker with deflections and blocks and steals and whatnot. So I think AD, it's not quite maybe as thorough of an outplaying as some fans would like, or even compared to like what Sabonis has done against him in the past. But I think AD continues to look more comfortable against Sabonis. And again, based on the way that some of those matchups had gone last year, the year before, I think that is a notable development. And then the third and final takeaway before we get into the Q&A is LA dominated the possession battle tonight. So I mentioned the offensive rebounding. They were +9 in offensive rebounds, +13 in field goal attempts, +12 in second chance points, +8 in free throw attempts, +7 in turnovers. And I think the offensive rebounding is notable because it's 3 straight games now for LA that they've had double-digit offensive rebounding. And on the season, they've been a bottom 10 offensive rebounding team and gone through periods where they've been bottom 5. So this is not quite translated the way that JJ wanted. Early in going back to the summer when he was first hired and going back to training camp, JJ talked about wanting to win the possession battle, believing in corner crashing, and trying to implement that. And LA did do some of that to start the season, but the transition defense was so bad, it was such a concern that they started to tone it down a bit. And now it really is player by player. JJ was saying like there's certain guys like Rui and Max who he's been really impressed with. Other guys like Dalton and Gabe who he feels like it's been a little bit more inconsistent, but when they've done it well, they've done it pretty well. And tonight, again, 13 offensive rebounds, 6 for AD because he had 8 and they took away 2. But Max had 3, Rui had 1, D'Lo had 1, and Gabe had 2. And I thought Gabe in particular had a couple of big ones around the free throw line. And those are the 50-50 balls that can swing a possession. And I thought LA did a really good job of capitalizing. And if you look at it, 18 second chance points for them off 13 offensive rebounds. So, of course, that could, in some cases, be like a kick out for a 3 or something. But let's just say they scored on like 7 to 9 of those 13 offensive rebounds. And like that's pretty good. So I think the combination of the offensive rebounds, getting to the free throw line, and taking care of the ball, where they only had 11 turnovers to the Kings 16. So it was a 5. This box score is a little confusing for some reason. It feels like the numbers are a little misplaced. But so it was a +5 difference in the turnover column. But still, that's notable. And again, for them to take 13 more shots than the Kings and 8 more free throws, that to me was the difference in the game, because the Kings still shot 46% overall. They missed a bunch of free throws. They shot 68% at the free throw line, but they shot nearly 6% better than the Lakers. They only made 1 fewer 3. The difference was LA took 13 more shots and 8 more free throws. So I think LA has done a better job, again, giving credit to some of the wings, some of the guards, in terms of winning 50-50 balls, being more active on that end. And this is a 4-game sample size, so I don't want to overreact and say Lakers have the league's best defense, that everything's fixed. Again, I think the offense is, we now have a growing sample size of the offense being concerning for several weeks now, but and it actually looked like tonight was going to be one of those nights where LA shot the ball really well. They started 7 of 16 on threes. They finished 12 of 33. So some quick math. They went, 5 of 16 the rest of the way. Not great. And ended up shooting 36.4% overall. But I think things are trending in the right direction. They have gone up in the standings. They've won 3 of 4. They've had a couple of nice wins against the Grizzlies and the Kings. They have another big game against Sacramento on Saturday. But I think they've given themselves some breathing room here in terms of you at least want to. I think if you're the Lakers, you wanted to at least split these two. You won the first one. Now you're playing with house money. Of course, it would be great to win the second one. And I think based on some of their physical advantages over the Kings, they probably should win the second one. But I'm sure the Kings will make some adjustments. Probably try to target some guys better defensively. I thought their post help didn't really make any sense. They were playing AD a lot one-on-one, and then helping from like one pass away, which is basketball 101, especially if you're going to help from one pass away, you better help aggressively and like be aggressive and assertive in your helping, and they were not doing that. So some questionable things from the Kings. Like they clearly are a really bad defensive team, and they made the Lakers look like the 04 Pistons at times with some of their defense. But I think really good win for the Lakers. Things are trending in a better direction, and I think that's about it for the three takeaways. Quickly, before we get into the Q&A, I wanted to give a quick shout out to Ethan, who is a fan here in Sacramento, goes to UC Davis, but he reached out to me on Instagram, and we met up outside the arena to just say a quick hello after the game. Brought me insomnia cookie, so set the standard high for fan interactions. But I appreciate your support, Ethan, and you reaching out to me at the game, and just as kind of I've talked about this before, but if you guys are ever at a game, either in LA or elsewhere, and I'm there, always love meeting fans of the show and the podcast, and really appreciate it. So thank you all and anyone. I don't think anyone's reached out that I haven't at least responded to and tried to meet up with, but yeah, I think that was really cool, and I appreciate the cookie. I will be having it a little bit later when I'm editing and writing before I go to bed. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A here. First one from Primo Near. I see no question. So if you can drop your question, I don't know if you just want, I appreciate the super chat, but if you have a question for me, please drop it in there and I will do my best to answer it. And then super chat from Dotun. The goal is to outscore your opponent every given game. All that matters. AR, Vando, Max, Braun, AD will feed families defensively. I can't wait. 80 missed ones. Yeah, you are right. Well, thank you for the super chat. You are right. The goal is to outscore your opponent every given game. That is all that matters. And I am fascinated by that lineup that you're touching on. AR, Vando, Max, Braun, AD. I believe that was one of my 5 lineups that I highlighted before the season that I would like to see, which is basically LA's 2 best 3-and-D-ish wings on paper. Of course, Vando's limited offensively, minus shooter, but at least I thought they're 2 best perimeter defenders, or kind of giving them that identity similar to the 2020 season. The 2 guys best equipped to do that in Vando and Max, and putting them around their 3 best players in AR, Braun, and AD. I think that's a really interesting lineup. We haven't really seen, off the top of my head, I feel like we haven't seen a lot of like AR, Max, Cam, Braun, AD, because that's probably the closest to this current lineup right now. I also don't think we've seen a lot of AR, Gabe, Max, Braun, AD, which is not as close, but I guess relatively similar in terms of like player profile of a more defensive minded guard / wing. But yeah, I think the big question here is like, when is Jared Vanderbilt going to return? And we're about a couple of weeks away from early January. Is he actually returning in early January? Is it later? I've not gotten great clarity on that yet. It's been pretty quiet. Like we got the Christian Wood update. We got the Jackson Hayes update. And I thought it was interesting that there was no Jared Vanderbilt update, really, just that he's back, rehabbing and not making the trip out to Sacramento. So that one, I continue to be a bit skeptical of the whole Vando situation and like when he's actually going to be back. But if the Lakers, if he comes back and they don't trade him, I'm intrigued by this lineup for sure. Jackson, Vando is an urban legend. He's a myth. At this point, yeah. Okay, are we having some mic? I see. Is okay. I see Jay saying the mic volume is low. Is the any is it the okay? Bang Charlie says Jovan, turn up the volume. Okay, I will try to turn up the volume. I'll bring the mic a little closer. How's this? Is this better? Okay, people are saying the mic is low. Jackson says it's fine. I apologize for the distraction. Is this better? I can make it. My fear is always making it too loud, because once you make it too loud, it's impossible to fix in terms of good. This is good. Okay, then I will I will keep this moving forward. Sorry, this is a bit of a quiet mic. It's higher quality than my previous mic that I traveled with. It's the same mic I have at home. I got a second one, but good to know. Question from Dark Galaxy. LFR suggested BI, Bruce Brown, and Kessler together. Thoughts? I think it would be tough to pull off with the draft capital, but if so, the Lakers have 2 first round picks they can trade, upwards of 3 swaps, and 5 second round picks. So ultimately, they have that's 10 picks to play with. And again, 2 first round picks, 3 swaps, first round swaps, and 5 second round picks. I would assume BI is going to cost a first. Kessler is going to cost a first, and Bruce Brown is a debatable first. I listened to the LFR episode, not today yet, so maybe that was the previous one. I think they were talking about seconds for Bruce Brown. He hasn't played yet, so that's one factor in LA's favor in terms of negotiating. If you could swing this, I would be very open to it. You know, it also depends on which players you're giving up, but I would assume that you're giving up Rui, D'Lo, Gabe, and I mean, maybe Rui, D'Lo, Gabe, and Vando all kind of combined, or at least 3 of those 4. I think that the Lakers in that case would try and keep Rui. But if you could bring in, I mean, if you make the starting lineup something like LeBron or AD, LeBron, BI, Bruce Brown or Max, and Austin, and then Bruce Brown or Max is coming off the bench with Kessler, Rui, and I'm not quite sure on the 9th guy. I think it would depend on, at that point you probably don't need a like Christian or Jackson in that 9th spot. Maybe it ends up being like Cam, or depending on what these trades look like, you create a roster spot and you could go sign someone. But I mean, if you could get those 3, I'm for it. I wonder if the asking price ultimately is a little too high in terms of like Utah really wanting a second first for Kessler, or Toronto increasing the bidding on Brown, getting that up from 2 to 3 seconds up to like a first, because the Lakers really only, like, maybe you could get away with it with a swap, but I'm also a little skeptical of LA using both picks. That's been something that I kind of talked about in my trade primer, but like the question right now, it seems like LA is going to make a trade. It's just a matter of the scale of the trade and potentially trades, but I don't know if they're going to use both first. That's something that I don't have great clarity on. Okay. And to be clear, Lakers in 7, I wasn't saying trading Max for Bruce Brown. It was just a matter of who's in the starting lineup. Charismatic character, Kessler, 3 million. Yeah, so it'd probably be JHS in that unless they do a bigger trade. Charismatic character again. Should the Lakers go for Cam Whitmore? I would like Cam Whitmore. I wonder what the price is for him. I mean, he is a guy that just went in the middle of the first round a year ago. I know he's fallen out of favor in Houston with their depth and just the way that they're playing, but I would assume they would be asking for a first round pick. I don't think they're like, I think him falling out of favor has more to do with Houston and the depth and the makeup of the team rather than Cam Whitmore specifically. So I would assume it would be a first round pick. So if the Lakers could somehow get away with like a protected first, I guess I would be interested in that. But I also think Cam Whitmore, for as good as he is, I think there's a reason why he's ultimately not playing that much on this Houston team. And he's a guy to me who might still be like another year or two away from really being like a high level role player / like fringe starter on a good team. And certainly is better than JHS. It would have been a better pick than JHS, but I think there's still a gap between like better than JHS and like, starter or like high level, high end bench guy on like a good team. So he seems to be more of like a fringe rotation guy right now on a good team. And I don't know if the price would be worth it. And I don't even know if Houston's willing to sell him. Sean Parker, Jovan, what's your thoughts on the Warriors getting blown out tonight? It was kind of reminiscent of the Lakers Heat game, and just kind of get it like things just snowballing on the road. So, I mean, I obviously not a great start for the Dennis Schroeder era. Golden State seems to kind of be going through it right now. That they've been pretty quickly descending in the West standings, but I think their thing is like they don't know their starting lineup right now. They almost have too much depth where it's put them in a bind sometimes with the rotation. So I think they got to figure that out. But I think they'll be okay. I still expect them to be in the top 10 in the West. I expect them to probably be a playoff team, but the hot start, I guess, seems to be more of a fool's gold type thing. Pieter K, bro, Reeves kind of nice tonight. Yeah, I've been trying to kind of keep the sort of game conversation a little bit shorter than I did maybe earlier in the season. But Austin Reeves was awesome tonight. This was one of his best games of the season. 25, 5 and 5. 25 was the third most points he has scored in a game this season. 8 for 9 from the free throw line. As I mentioned, 3 steals. Austin was, I mean, I would probably say their second best player tonight behind AD, and at times was their best player. I mean, was their leading scorer. So I think Austin, Headman Austin, as he's affectionately been labeled now. I mean, he's got a different kind of swag. I don't know. He's played with he's playing well. I think Austin is coming into his own in terms of his role in the starting lineup. Feels like there's a bit more stability. Not as like I think also having Dalton and D'Lo come off the bench and not be starting next to him as they were at times over the last couple of weeks. That's kind of condensed the offensive hierarchy, and it's a lot more Austin, LeBron, AD within that starting group. And then Rui is kind of picking up the scraps. He's been struggling a little bit offensively. And then Max is obviously more of the fifth option there and just getting transition buckets, offensive rebounds, and like spot up threes. So I think the changes, honestly, in my opinion, have been good for everyone. Like D'Lo's been playing a little bit better. I mean, he's been up and down, but like tonight, I thought he was good offensively. Gabe's been playing better, especially defensively. So it feels like the Lakers are really coming into their own with the rotation and sort of just the hierarchy of the team. I think the minutes have made a lot more sense. The lineups have made more sense. They're obviously decimated in the front court, having to play Rui at center, having to play like Dalton or Max at the 4. Clearly, tonight was a night that they didn't trust Christian Coloco. He only played 4 minutes, but if they could get Jackson or Christian back soon, or they make a trade, I think that they're cooking with something. And Pieter K again, yo fellas, let's give Jovan some likes for real, please. If you're watching this, you have not liked it yet, consider liking it. Dark Galaxy says he wouldn't trade a first round pick for Whitmore. I probably wouldn't too. You only have 2 to trade, and I'm more so was commenting on what I think his price would be. I don't see Houston. I think that's bad asset management on Houston's part, just to sell a first round pick that had a pretty solid rookie season that has fallen out of favor in terms of the rotation, but just to give him up for like a second rounder or a couple seconds, I think that would be pretty dumb on Houston's part. So I don't see Houston doing that. I think that they would probably have to get a first to get another crack at getting another type of rotation guy. And I think based on what LA is trying to do, that was kind of my point, is I don't think Whitmore is I don't think it's a win now move necessarily. I think that, like, if you're tearing it down, then and you view him as a potential longer term piece, that's a different story. But as of now, if LA's trying to win now, I don't think Whitmore makes sense. And I don't even know if he's available. L.A. Jovan, do you think 2 first round picks plus protection removal of 2027 first round pick and 2 second round picks and a first round pick swap for DFS is enough? Too much? Is this I'm kind of confused here. Is this a trolling question? Because that's far too much. Far too much. I was waiting to see who the player was going to be that you were asking. Dark Galaxy, Jovan, what are your thoughts on Max's rotation? I feel like he should match his primary opponent's minutes. He seems to be coming in a tad bit later after his first stint. I don't think they're quite there in terms of matching Max. I think they are trying to get Gabe. If it's a smaller guard, I think they're trying to get Gabe in there. If it's a bigger guard/wing, they're trying to get Cam in there. We'll note Cam only played 11 and a half minutes tonight, so that they have been reducing his minutes a bit. I think Max is in a good place. I don't like. I think one thing with Max that we've seen in terms of a development has been his foul drawing. He's done a really nice job of drawing contact on his drives, and I think he kind of exposes the ball in a way where people will reach or swipe at it, but then he holds on to it well and just kind of pushes through the contact and like draws it. So I think he's done a really good job recently of getting to the free throw line and drawing contact in transition or in rotation. He attacks a closeout and then he draws a foul. So I think he's done a good job with that. I think 28 minutes, I mean, maybe you could push it to 32 in some matchups. I still think LA's trying to keep everybody happy. And when you have like D'Lo only playing 23, Gabe at 22, and then everyone else was basically 11 or less, like they were playing a pretty condensed rotation tonight. I think 28 is fine, especially for that fifth starter. So I'm okay with it. Maybe and tonight was I think Gabe and D'Lo both played fairly well off the bench. And I thought Gabe got rewarded for making some threes. D'Lo had a slow start. I think he started 2 for 6. And then from that point went 5 for 9 the rest of the way. Had 6 rebounds. So he was active on the glass. And I mentioned some of his defense earlier. So I think 28 is kind of in line for what I would expect from Max. Again, maybe it could tick up a little bit, but I don't think he's going to be like a mid-30s guy. And also another factor here was De'Aaron Fox was in foul trouble, so that he played probably a little bit less than he normally would. So maybe if he plays 2 to 3 more minutes, Max ends up playing 2 to 3 more minutes. But I think Max is in a really good place. He has played well as a starter. I think he's going to continue to start. He's held Ja and De'Aaron Fox to poor shooting performances in consecutive games. And I think LA's really happy with where Max is at right now. Anthony A, why not get Lonzo if he's basically free? I think that the one issue with Lonzo right now is that, well, there's the health concern, but it's just salary matching because he's making like low 20s. So you basically have to throw in Vando and Gabe. And I know with Vando's health, people want to ship him out. And I know with Gabe's shooting struggles on the season, people are willing to drive him to the airport. But I think if you really look at it, Lonzo has not played that well this season. He's also missed several games due to injury, and I think it's a risk that could certainly pan out. I'm like, potentially the upside of Lonzo could outweigh the upside of Gabe or Vando this season. I'm not I don't think that's like a crazy take, but there's a lot of risk in like trading those two because I think that gets you there close salary wise. And on top of it, because of his contract situation and because of Gabe and Vando's contract situations, like I would assume I don't think it would be free. I think they'd want at least a couple seconds, and that might be too rich for LA in terms of giving up two potential rotation guys for a rotation guy who they're not sure can stay healthy, and also investing some draft capital in that. So, I mean, if Lonzo can stay healthier for a stretch and play better, I'm more open to that. But if you look at his performance this season, he's not like back, right? Like he's been playing better recently, but I wouldn't quite say he's like back to old Lonzo or even close to old Lonzo. And then when you factor in just the salary and the matching, I think it gets a little tricky. Like I'm not opposed to it, but also for the record, and I hope you guys know to not believe everything you see, but I got quoted. Someone said, I think it was like Basketball Forever or something, had a fake report that I said Kuzma and Lonzo are going back to the Lakers. Like I never said that. So I hope you guys that tune into the live streams and listen to the podcast, like you guys know when I report something or when I say something. And I just had the big trade primer video and I reported stuff and talked about stuff on there. Kuzma was a name I mentioned, never mentioned Lonzo, but I also never said he was coming. I just said he's a player that's been linked to the Lakers. So just hopefully you guys don't, because there was another fake report that someone did. Like I always get fake aggregated. It's really frustrating, but I can't control it. Once someone puts something out there, it gets a bunch of retweets and then takes on. Like I had people texting me about it, like, "Oh, our Lakers got Kuzma and Lonzo, or they're coming back," and I was like, "I never even said this," but I blocked Basketball Forever. They also misspelled my name, but whatever. The aggregation stuff really bothers me. Jackson, Jovan, do you think Gabe could take over D'Lo's spot as the backup guard if we trade him for Cam Johnson / DFS? He's been a better as of late, and he plays better when he has a bigger role. I think that's certainly possible. And when you factor in, he's obviously a much better defender than D'Lo. And I think he has looked better when he's had the ball in his hands a bit more and had more freedom offensively. Perhaps we could see the Gabe Vincent of old. I wouldn't consider him like a keeper, but if it just works out where Brooklyn wants D'Lo, let's say they do a Brooklyn trade and Brooklyn wants D'Lo because of the expiring contract, and they end up keeping Gabe and don't end up flipping him, that's a scenario that I would be open to. Now, I do think, especially if they do like the Valanciunas trade, it would almost have to be Gabe from a financial perspective. They could do Vando, but Vando has more years left. He's also injured. I don't know if Washington's going to want to take that on. So I think Gabe's salary is a little bit, not more movable, but like I think he's probably a little bit more expendable for them than D'Lo is. But I think if there's a scenario in which he ends up staying a Laker and getting a slightly bigger offensive role off the bench, I think there are worse scenarios, like trading both D'Lo and Gabe and then just not having a backup point guard at all. So I'm not opposed to that. All right, couple super chats here. One from J.R. Madrano. The most recent LFR pod, they laid out their all-in trade picks scenario. what is your all-in scenario? What players are you trying to get? It's a good question. I think my two favorite players on the trade market right now are Walker Kessler and Cam Johnson. And I think the Lakers could probably get both of those each for a first round pick. Maybe you got to throw in a second. I've talked about with Utah, maybe you unprotect the top four of that 2027 draft as like a sort of meeting in the, a compromise where you don't give them a second first round pick, but you say, hey, this is top four protected. We'll remove the protection. I think both of those guys, unless Utah is really hellbent, on keeping Kessler, which seems like they're purposely asking for the moon for him, right? But it's also seemed like he's not always been fully in favor there. But I think if you could give up a first and a second or two for Kessler, or the remove the protections, or maybe it's a second and remove the protections, whatever, not two firsts, and get that done, and then also give up a first and a second or whatever for Cam Johnson, I think both of those moves would help a lot. So for Cam, I would assume it would be something like D'Lo. It gets a little tricky because you're probably giving up JHS for Walker Kessler plus the picks. So you do that. Then it's probably D'Lo. Might have to be Jackson and Christian, or Christian and Cam. So, some form of the minimum guys. You probably have to give up three because Cam Johnson's outgoing salary is probably going to go up to $27 million with the incentives in his contract. And if you can do that, then you are setting out four guys, getting back two. So now you have a couple roster spots. Maybe you only end up signing one guy, keeping one roster spot open. Gives you some flexibility. Also gives you a little bit of room under the second apron. But for me, I think based on who is available, who I think is realistic, and I don't know if there's one player necessarily. Like, sure, if the Lakers could use 2 first-round picks for Jimmy Butler or something like that, like, I'd be interested in the thought exercise of like what that looks like. But based on the matching salary, based on his age, based on having to pay him, I don't know if Jimmy Butler is what this group needs. And Trae Young is like a kind of been one that's been floated for years and attached to the Lakers, and I've reported on that in the past. But that, again, matching salary and giving up a lot. And so I think Walker Kessler and Cam Johnson, and then you start, if you can keep Rui, which I think you probably could, and maybe you could attach Vando instead of the minimum guys, but then he's not expiring. So I don't know if Brooklyn wants to deal with that. But let's just say it is like D'Lo plus a couple of minimum guys. Then now you have AD, LeBron, Cam, let's say Max and Austin, and that's your starting five. And then your bench is now, you still have Gabe, you still have Rui, you still have Dalton, obviously. I think when I was talking about the bench earlier, I think I forgot Dalton. Dalton would obviously be in there. Gabe, Rui, Dalton, and Walker Kessler. And that's your 9-man rotation. I really like that team. I think it's a really good team. You can go big with Kessler and AD. You could get funky with it. You could probably even throw out, like, depending on the opponent, Kessler, AD, LeBron, Cam Johnson, Austin. It gets super funky with it. So I think you're adding size, you're adding defense, you're adding a true backup who can play next to AD in certain configurations, and you're also creating a couple roster spots to go sign another guard or whatever you feel like you need at that point. So, and if you really want to go make other moves, you still have some second round picks and swaps to play with if you want to flip Gabe for something else, or you'd also still have Vando in this scenario. So I like the 10-man rotation, the bench being Gabe, Rui, Vando, Kessler and Dalton, I like that 10-man rotation. So I think for me, I think getting Johnson and Kessler are both realistic, depending if LA is willing to put both first round picks on the table. And I think both of those guys with their size, with Johnson, it's more so the shooting, the offense. With Kessler, it's the size, the rim protection, the rebounding. I think both guys also are in their 20s, could be longer term pieces that go past the LeBron era. I think that's my all in move. Another super chat from Michael D. Would you be convinced, if not already, that the front office clearly does not believe in this team if they don't use every available asset to improve right now? I'm not quite at every available asset, but I've said if they don't use a first round pick, like I want to see what the rest of the market goes for, right? Like if Cam Johnson goes for 2 first round picks or Walker Kessler goes for 2 first round picks, either one of those prices is too rich for my blood. And I would not fault the Lakers for not using 2 first round picks to get one of those 2 guys. So right now, I think that the market has corrected a little bit. It's lowered a little bit because of the Dennis Schroeder trade, where people are now looking at a DFS, a Bruce Brown. Like those were kind of fringe first round pick guys. And now they're looking at them like, okay, well, those guys probably aren't going for first round picks. It's probably going for a couple seconds, maybe 3 seconds tops. Jonas Valanciunas is probably another guy kind of in that mix as well. But if the market overcorrects and all of a sudden you start to see some of these other guys go for 2 first round picks, or someone, Valanciunas goes for a first round pick, which I think would be an overpay, then I think I don't fault the Lakers necessarily as much, because I think at that point they're doing the cost benefit analysis of, okay, well, we're not necessarily improving that much. And you can make the counterpoint that like any improvement is worth it, especially when you have LeBron and AD in the short window. But I think the bar for me is first round pick. If they do not trade a first round pick at by the deadline, I don't think they were serious about going for it. And I don't think they were serious about this group. I think that's the bar for me. Obviously, like I think trading more picks, investing more draft capital, getting back better players would show a level of seriousness. And in that case, like there are scenarios in which I would think they'd be overpaying, but for the most part, I would say if they trade both first round picks, like unless it's a really bad trade, I'm gonna at least give them credit for going for it, even if it doesn't work out. The thing I've said is like if they just do the Valanciunas trade, let's say they trade 2 seconds for Valanciunas, and that's the only move, that to me is a complete like sham of it's a performance to say, well, we went for it, we did, like it's a half measure, and they went for it, they made a trade, oh, let's see what Valanciunas does, and then like if 3 weeks later the team is the 9 seed and they don't decide to trade a first round pick, then at that point, I think all the criticism in the world is fair game, and they clearly just didn't believe in LeBron and AD. So for me, my standard is a first round pick and above. Of course, I think 2 first round picks would show a higher level of seriousness, but my bar for criticism is going to be if they don't trade at least 1 first round pick, I don't think they're serious. I don't think they believe in this group. And at that point, again, I think any criticism is fair. Okay. Back into the chat. I'm going to go about 10 more minutes. Charismatic character. I say just trade JHS and Maxwell Lewis for Daron Sharp. I, of course, would prefer to trade JHS for Kessler, but if that's unrealistic, then I really like Daron Sharp. I also like him in a potential Cam Johnson or DFS type deal. Puppy Chow 302. I think this is a fair point from you. Dunleavy Jr. said they want to maximize their window with Steph. Plinka has never said anything close. Says a lot. I think this is a fair point because I do think they've walked the line publicly in terms of not fully saying they're going all in or that they fully believe in this core. I mean, they've, like JJ said, the championship aspirations thing, I think it was his first answer at his opening press conference, and that he understands the expectations of the job and like he wants to win a championship his first year. That's always the standard. They've alluded to championship expectations, and I think realistically, if you're going to allude to that, you are going to evaluate the roster through a certain lens, and this roster isn't up to par with those expectations. But to your point, I think they have, I wouldn't say couched it necessarily, but they have been cautious in terms of like how they framed it publicly. So there is some plausible deniability in terms of if they don't make a move or they make a small move and then don't make a bigger move, they can at least say, well, kind of blame the trade market again or the new CBA or like whatever. So I think there are some built-in excuses that they are going to try to make if they don't make one. But again, I that will not fly with me. I will come on here and be honest with you guys about what I think about the trade deadline. Overqualified. Why would you not make a trade for 2 years if you are not a contender? That's absurd. It is. I think the one time I will give them a slight pass is, I think, because I think a lot of times with these things we do a bunch of revisionist history and like we will retroactively blame something or criticize it after the fact because the plan didn't work out. And I will say, at least on my end, 2023 offseason, I understood because it was like, you know, Dennis had been pretty up and down, and he had some high highs, but I think at times the shot selection, the turnovers were a bit of an issue for the Lakers. And I think looking like now we can say Gabe Vincent replacing Dennis Schroeder was a mistake. But at the time, Gabe Vincent was coming off being the starting guard for a Heat team that just made the finals, was a big part of that Heat team, and looked to be a slight defensive downgrade from Dennis, but a more efficient and effective offensive player, a more reliable offensive player, and a player who could probably fit better without the ball, where Dennis was a little bit more ball dominant, though, you know, obviously the ball dominant, like, or the lack of, or the playing off the ball has not worked out for Gabe. So again, in retrospect, like obviously the Gabe situation has not worked out, but at the time, a lot of people were praising the Lakers for replacing Dennis with Gabe. And then even the Torian signing for him being a biannual exception guy, like him replacing Troy Brown and Malik Beasley, like that was an upgrade. So I think go back to the 2023 summer, because it's really been 3 trade cycles. It's been 2023 summer, because 2023 deadline, obviously they made all the moves. So 2023 summer, 2024 deadline, 2024 summer. 2023 summer, I don't hold against them. They had a group that just went to the conference finals. They did retool it a bit, and they went out and got Gabe and got Torian. Really, the only mistakes they made were giving Jackson, Christian, and Cam all player options. The only good player option has really been Jackson. I think Cam like wasn't worth a player option. You could have just re-signed him if you really liked him. But Christian was, I think, a mistake, especially based on his health. So giving 3 player options to minimum guys was a mistake at the time, and it has not aged well. But the 2024 trade deadline and then the 2024 offseason, that's where I think the criticism is warranted, and there's really no justification. And especially if you weren't going to do something at the 2024 trade deadline, you almost had to do something in the 2024 offseason, and they didn't. So I've been critical of that. I said I think it was a mistake. I said I think they should have made moves at the 2024 trade deadline and then again in the offseason, and they didn't. So that's not revisionist history. That's how I felt. That's what I said at the time, and I've only continued to feel that. And I think it's aged well because they have been better recently. But like on the whole, I don't they've not looked like a championship team. So we'll see. But again, if they don't make any moves or they don't make any big moves, clearly this is something where they just don't believe in this core. And then I think next summer, or whatever, 6 months from now, we have to have a conversation at that point of, if they didn't go for it, what's the future with LeBron and AD? What's the point of having these guys if you just wasted another season with them? And then at that point, it's kind of like, what do those guys want? Do they still want to be there? Do they want to go elsewhere? Like, what's their future? And I think the conversation shifts more to that. Super chat from the Snow. I don't fully understand the hype with Dorian. I feel like it'll just be another Dinwiddie or Beasley type of situation. They'll sell on the Lakers. And thank you for the super chat. Certainly possible with Dorian, and I think it is worth noting with Dorian that he has played more big, or more big man defensively. He's been more of like a 4 or a 5 rather than a 3, and I think that's notable because I think the Lakers are going to need him to be more of a 3, and he's rated well. Cran just recently talked about this on one of his pods, but he's rated well defensively, but that hasn't been his role. So it's one of two things, right? It's either that's not the role they need him to be in because of the personnel that Brooklyn has, or they don't think he's capable of doing that. And maybe he's done it well in bursts, but not done it well at a more sustainable kind of higher level. And that's certainly a concern. I think at this point, I've gotten to the point where if you don't have to give up a first for Dorian, I think he's worth the risk. A first, I think, is probably too much for me, especially looking at the rest of the market right now. But if it's, the other thing is he's only making like 14 million. So if it costs you, if it's like Gabe and Christian Wood in like 2 seconds, I would do that in a heartbeat. I think it's worth the risk. So I've cooled a little bit on Dorian, but I think the shooting, it's always a funny variable with the Lakers because the Lakers seem to get role players who are shooting well and they don't shoot well for the team. I don't know if it's the lights in crypto. I don't know if it's the pressure with the fan base, the scrutiny, the spotlight, whatever it is. But like some guys have really struggled as shooters, kind of similar to two of the guys you are mentioning there with Dinwiddie and Beasley. So I still like Dorian. I think he's tough. I think he's got just an element of he just has this element that I don't think the Lakers have in terms of toughness and ruggedness and the proverbial dog in him that I don't think the Lakers have a lot of guys that play like that. And he is shooting 40% or around there on the season. I don't know the recent numbers off the top of my head, but he's basically been a 40% 3-point shooter, consistently done that in, I think, like 3 of the last 5 years. And I think just he's a defensive upgrade. If the competition is like Rui and Dalton in some ways, because that's kind of some of the guys he's going to be in competition with at like the 3 and the 4. And even Vando's not healthy, so I'm not even throwing him in there. But if he's compared to Rui and Dalton defensively, I think it's night and day, and he's a significant upgrade over both of those guys. Okay, going about 5 more minutes here. Noir says, how about Michael Porter Jr.? I think it's interesting. I would be interested. The issue with MPJ is he's making so much money. And I think Denver is going to have a high price to trade him. I would assume with the Lakers and because Denver's in win now mode. So Denver's not trading Michael Porter Jr. Like they're not just accepting D'Lo and Rui and Gabe and like a first round pick for Michael Porter Jr. They're going to want actual guys back. And I think this is a trade where Lakers would potentially have to put in Austin or Dalton. And I don't know if they would do that for this, for MPJ. And then this is a guy who is going to command at least one first, if not both, especially with LA not having I think like comparable players, because like the one recent trade that's been thrown out there is like MPJ for Zach LaVine, but like Zach LaVine is a higher level player than anyone the Lakers are potentially sending to Denver's way. Especially, remember, D'Lo Denver is a thing, and I don't see Denver being like, oh, let's bring in D'Lo with he's a guy that we talk trash to in the press and have targeted defensively. Let's bring him in and him be a part of our team. Like I don't see that, and it's hard to match the salary without D'Lo being in it. And Gabe actually didn't have a great finals against them, so I don't see them being really interested in Gabe either. So I think MPJ makes sense, but to offset some of the salary or some of the players you're sending back, you'd probably have to give up both firsts, which I'd be open to, honestly. But I also just don't think Denver would like the players LA is offering. Bruce Chang, Wendell Carter, he signed an extension and cannot be traded this season, so it would have to be next summer. Ethan Perez, it seems like the Valanciunas one is expected to happen sooner rather than later. Fair. Yes, but technically it could have happened as of Sunday and it hasn't. So I'm not sure where that stands in terms of LA's urgency with it. It feels like my assumption would be that Washington is trying to create more of a market and more of a bidding war, because you just saw Denver got linked to Valanciunas. So perhaps that price goes up a bit. L.A. I saw your comment earlier. I know you had said you meant, I think, Kessler and someone else. That would have changed my opinion. If it was all for DFS, that was a clear no. Jovan, would you do Vando and D'Lo plus a first round pick in 2 seconds for Hunter and Nance? It's an inch. Yeah, I think I would. I really like DeAndre Hunter, and not just because he played well against the Lakers, but I think he's the exact type of wing that they could use. The second round picks, I'd kind of fight to lower that, because now I think for that price you could probably go get Cam Johnson, and I'd rather have Cam Johnson, though DeAndre Hunter is a better defender. Pally Pan, Brovon Buha. You know what? I like new nicknames. Although I hope that's a good one. JOD, drafting JHS was a horrible 2023 offseason move. Yes, it was. Glenn S. Hot take: does Austin remind you of like a poor man's Manu Ginobili play style? Yeah, he does. And Darvin tried to spin the benching of Austin last year as that. So, I mean, yeah, but there's certainly some similarities there. Of course, he's not on Manu's level. Andre Miller, I trust Valanciunas more than anyone on the trade market. I think he'll end up in Denver. I will say, like, Valanciunas, there's a level of reliability and stability with him. I just also think, like, you know what you're going to get. He's been kind of the same guy for I mean, almost a decade now, looking at his career. Just the problem has been the defensive slippage. And I think LA, with the way that they're defending right now, and the way that, of course, AD plays a certain style of defense, but even the way that like Christian Koloko is defended, I think it's just such a downgrade from a rim protection mobility standpoint, going to a guy like Valanciunas. Like, he's a statue. And in certain defensive situations, like, can he bang with a Sabonis or a Jokic in the post? Sure. And if those teams are simply going to run post-ups, then Valanciunas could have some value in those scenarios because of his strength, his physicality, and he's just a really big body. But if they start to run more pick and roll, if they start to run more complex actions, stacks and dribble handoffs and different things where you get him out in space and you get him having to make quick decisions and move his feet, that's where Valanciunas is really going to struggle. And that's just kind of been the Achilles heel in his game. And I think when we look at what the Lakers need from the backup, the theoretical backup center spot, to me, it starts with defense, and then we could talk about any other skill set. But we're not signing, or if I'm the Lakers, like they're not signing a player for or trading for one to hit 16-foot jumpers or to hit a post, a hook shot in the post. They're trading for that player to be a rim protector, to be a rebounder, to be a defender, and Valanciunas is a good rebounder, but the other two areas in terms of just overall defense and rim protection, he is subpar. And I think even a guy like Jakob Poeltl, who's making almost double the salary and has a tougher contract because he has multiple years, like he's a better defender. He slipped, but like I actually like Jakob Poeltl more as a fit than Valanciunas. So, but even so, I like Kessler, I like Robert Williams, Daron Sharp, Nick Richards. Like I think there are other guys who are younger, better defensively, a bit more mobile, and just make more sense and potentially even cost less. Obviously, Kessler is going to cost more, but some of the other ones are probably cheaper. Might not even cost multiple seconds. Their Galaxy, do you believe the Nets will be urgent to trade Cam Johnson if they keep winning like today? Yes, I do. They're winning too much, so I could see the urgency with them. Vexilate, Jovan, why does LeBron look like he's getting really tired so so often? Is it age, cardio problem, workload? I think I wouldn't say cardio problem. I think LeBron's in great shape. So I wouldn't I never worry about LeBron in being in shape. I think the other two things are fair, like age. He's about to be 40, and forget father, like the whole conversation with father time and comparing him to other NBA players. Just think about like biologically, you are going to be in a different, all of us are going to be in a different physical shape from breathing and your cardiovascular and all that stuff when you're 40 compared to when you're 35 or when you're 30 or whatever. So that's totally normal. That's to be expected. I think the workload, LA has been kind of yo-yoing with his workload. I think that's partly why I've talked about it. Like I sometimes am more okay with LeBron not giving his full effort defensively because he's asked to do so much offensively. I didn't even mention it, and my bad on this, but LeBron tonight became the all-time minutes leader in the regular season. Now, technically, he's already the all-time minutes leader because he's the all-time minutes leader in the playoffs. And that gap that he has, he's already technically played the most minutes in NBA history. But now he officially passed Kareem in the regular season. So he's played the most regular season minutes, the most playoff minutes, and the most minutes overall. So that kind of plays into this of like the dude has more miles on him than any player in NBA history. And most guys in his age range and with that mileage or playing as many years, even playing past like 18 years, are cooked at this point in their career. So for LeBron to still be playing at an all-star, wouldn't quite say all NBA level, but to be playing at like an all-star level still at this age is incredible. It's unprecedented. We haven't seen it outside of Kareem was able to do it also, but he also entered the league a little bit later, so little different circumstances there. But we've just never seen someone be this elite this late into their career, and I think some concessions have to come with that, and sometimes that's the defensive end. But I think with LeBron, they're trying to play him shorter bursts. They didn't play him shorter bursts tonight, which I thought was funny. JJ talked about it pregame, and then it didn't really happen. But they are trying to reduce his minutes a little bit, play him shorter bursts. And tonight he played 34 minutes, so that's below his season average. And I didn't really talk about LeBron. I mean, 19 points, 6 rebounds, 7 assists. I thought he had a really solid game and solid fourth quarter, especially. So, yeah, I think with LeBron, like we've seen him look a little bit more human, but it took till almost age 40 and year 22 for him to finally show that he's not a complete cyborg. Sky Falcon 5, our opinion of MPJ is way inflated because he kills us. That's not, he kills us. He's not that good. You're probably right. I've seen some insane MPJ performances, so I probably have a skewed perception of him. Jackson, that was a long 5 minutes, Jovan. Yeah, so I'm getting to the point where I'm about to wrap. So I'll answer two more questions. Kane Carter always asks some fun non-Lakers questions. What team did you have the most fun covering? What was the most frustrating, brutal covering? I'll give you two different answers. So I previously covered the Clippers for my first 2 years at the Athletic, then switched over to the Lakers as my fifth year covering the Lakers. I'll say with the Clippers, the first year covering them, 2018-19, that was the year they made the playoffs. Didn't have a star. Like their go-to guy had been Tobias Harris. Then they ended up trading him at the trade deadline. So it was like Lou Williams, rookie Shea, Montrezl Harrell, Zubats. Like it was kind of this ragtag group that pushed the Warriors to 6 games. And that was fun. It was my first season covering, not my first season covering the NBA. That was technically, I guess, my 8th season covering the NBA, but first season as a beat writer, first season traveling. And that was a fun team because it's always fun when a team you're covering exceeds expectations because it's always like this fun, feel good story. So that for the Clippers. And then certainly the second year, what was the second one of, that was when they got Kawhi, PG, and collapsed in the bubble. And I wrote on their team chemistry, and that was a wild season. That was also COVID. So, you know, that was crazy. For the Lakers, I would say most fun team was honestly probably the 2022-23 team post trade deadline. So post getting like the Western Conference Finals run, like that was the most fun I've had covering a team. But I put the delineation of like post trade deadline because obviously first half of that season was Russ, Pat Bev. It was a bit of a mess. They were the 13th seed, I think, entering the trade deadline. So like that was not a fun team to cover. But the final 30 games and then into the conference finals, that was the first. That's the farthest a team I've covered is gone in the playoffs. So I would say that was the most fun. And then most frustrating / brutal, it's got to be the first Russ season, and just that whole debacle of, what Russ had like a crazy bad game his first game. I forgot he shot something like 3 for 14 or 3 for 11. Had a pretty bad game, and that really set the tone for how the rest of that season was going to go. And that was a season where, first season LeBron and AD, they won a championship. I didn't cover it then. I covered their second season. That team, I think, had a legitimate shot at winning the championship if they stayed healthy, but LeBron got injured, AD got injured, AD gets injured again in the Phoenix series. And I think at that point, the standard was like, Lakers are championship contenders with LeBron and AD, and then they make the Westbrook trade, and then they win, I think, 33 games that year. And just from the finger pointing and just how bad the basketball was, that was also like the Ariza, Kendrick Nunn, DeAndre, Dwight, Damian Jones, THT, Monk was on that team, so that was a bright spot. That was also the year, at the end of the year, Frank Vogel got fired, which was the most awkward like situation I've ever covered, where he gets fired walking off the court, and then we're watching him talk to like Lakers PR and then have to go like answer questions and talk to us, even though it's been announced he's been fired. So I would say that was the most frustrating season I've ever covered. Though 2022, 23 and 2023, 24, or the first half of 2022, 23, and then the last year, I would say both of those seasons are not far behind, but 2021, 22 takes the cake as like a season from hell. Romel, when Jovan said 10 more minutes, that equals 10 minutes for me is like an hour, I guess. Puppy Chow 302, Jovan, any chance of getting Dave McMenamin on your podcast? There's some, I've talked to Dave. There's some restrictions with ESPN and him doing non ESPN pods, but I might do a beat writer roundtable with Dave, Dan Wojcicki of the LA Times, and Kobe Price, and we're the 4 primary beat writers that travel. So I might do something where we're all on here, and that one might be a little unhinged, but I think that would be fun. L.A. Jovan, which reporter has the best relationship with LeBron? Wendy, McTen, Rachel Nichols, you. Not me. I would say it's between. I don't know the state of Windhorst and LeBron, and I don't want to speculate on that, but I would say it's probably between McMenamin and actually Chris Haynes, I would say. But Rachel, obviously, Wendy got his start covering LeBron and covered him in Cleveland and Miami. Rachel has a really good relationship with him too. So, but I would say it's between McMenamin and Chris Haynes. Thank Charlie. When are we fans going to be able to ask you questions using our voices? I know I mentioned that. I gotta figure that out. Cause for example, like if I look at your comment here, cause I'm controlling the comments popping up. There's like a little, I could delete a comment. I could put a user in timeout. I could ban a user and delete comments. There's no like add them to the thing. So I think one fix that, or one way to do this is I can invite people to the stream. There's an invite link. So what I might do is post the invite link in here. And then if you click that, it'll open it up. And I still have to let you in like onto the screen, but I might do that. I've also been considering doing a membership at some point, and maybe that is like the easy way where we could do a Zoom or something and like a once a month Zoom or once every couple weeks or whatever, and shoot the shit for like an hour. So I am using StreamYard right now for Jackson. Bob the Builder, did you ever make a top 10 NBA players all time list? I haven't. That's probably an off season thing for me that I'll do. I mean, I really would have to think about it. Like I have a general idea of my top 10, but I'd like to do a more thorough analysis to really like suss through it. I think Charlie membership would work too. I'd be down for paying up some cheese for supporting my man Jovan. Thank you. I appreciate it. Dark Galaxy saw Superman trailer. I did. It looks really good. I've never been a big Superman guy, to be honest. I've always been a Batman guy. So I never really saw like Man of Steel and those movies, but this one looks good. L.A. Jovan, do you need an intern? I need to be one for school. I might. Send me an email. I guess you guys just jbuha at theathletic.com. That's a good Jackson saying, Jovan, can you post the link in chat, then pin the message so people can join? Yeah, I'll do that next time. I am about to wrap, so I don't want to just invite everyone on and then extend this too much. But I technically have not answered a second Lakers question. That's what's keeping me going right now. King Carter, how do you find the balance between keeping it professional without stepping on players' toes? Is that the downside to this business? Yeah, I mean, I try to operate where like I don't say anything that I wouldn't say to a player or anyone's face, whether it's Rob, Jeannie, an opposing player, like whoever it is. I try to only say stuff that I would say to someone's face. So that's kind of the standard I try to keep it to. But certainly, like, you know, there's an element of professionalism where if I misspeak and say the wrong thing, my job or could be in jeopardy, or my relationships with certain people could be in jeopardy. So it is a bit of a balance. But at this point, I've done it for so long. Like I haven't done it in this platform, and that's been its own kind of thing of I'm so used to writing in my thoughts and reporting and analyzing and all that stuff with my coverage that's a little easier because you're writing it, then you're editing it, and like you're really filtering and controlling what you want to say or report or whatever. This is obviously live, and I'm just you know, it's coming directly out of my mouth as I'm seeing the questions and interacting with you guys. So that part's a little different, but I do try and keep that like professional balance. Sean Parker, did you like the Batman movie? I did. I think it's really good. Of course, like for me, Dark Knight will always be the best, but it's right there. Jesse, Alfred, Manrique, what would a package for Pirtle and Brown look like? I feel like for that combination, they'd probably ask for a first, but you could also argue that Pirtle and his contract offsets that, and like it's not worth a first. So like maybe 3 seconds combined for both, depending, and you also got to match salary. Hey, Jovan, who's reporting and writing style do you like the most out of all the people covering the Lakers besides yourself, of course? I think everyone brings something different to the table. I think from like a news perspective, I would say Dave. I would say from like a narrative perspective, and kind of weaving in analysis with reporting. I think Dan Wojcicki of the LA Times does a good job. And then I think Kobe Price, who I've had on here a couple times, he does a really good job of analyzing the team, and he's more into like analytics and numbers and stuff. And we have really good, I think, high level conversations about the team. So I think each one of them kind of has their own lane, and you know, I think there's things about them I admire. Sean Parker, Jovan, do reporters have to fight for questions when talking to players' coaches, or is it coordinated? It's a combination. It depends. Like, so it depends with JJ, for example. He'll always talk in like a press conference setting, so he's always at the table. Then we raise our hands, and beat writers get priority. So typically, Mike Trudell always gets the first question, and then it goes into some combination of myself and Dan and Dave and Kobe. And so that press conference situations are a little bit different. It's a little bit more coordinated. It's a little bit more, you know, coordinated, organized, whatever. In a press scrum or like, you know, typically with LeBron and AD, they speak at their locker, or a player at practice. Or JJ, I mean, I guess with JJ, the one situation outside of a game that it's more organic is out of practice, and then that's where it's more of a free for all. Like typically, they will give each of us a chance to ask a question, and sometimes they'll even call on us and be like, "Hey, Jovan, do you have a question for LeBron?" For example. But it does get it's gotten not with us, but like with typically outside media. If it's someone coming to a practice, it doesn't typically go there, or especially on the road, some of the road media gets, people are elbowing each other, and it's pretty stupid. But yeah, sometimes it gets a little heated. Dark Galaxy, does every Lakers away game feel like a home game, except for Boston? I wouldn't say every road game. I mean, tonight was it's crazy because of the Kings Lakers history and the rivalry, or you know, back in 20 years ago, the rivalry. a lot of Laker fans there. I'm trying to think of the arenas that don't like. To your point, I mean, even in Boston, though, there'll be a good amount of Laker fans. Like, there's a lot of Laker fans in most road arenas. I would say some of the bigger ones being like, I think San Francisco, Chicago, New York, and Boston. It kind of depends on the game and like how the Lakers are doing, maybe, and maybe there's situations in which there's more, but those also have strong home crowds, like some of the bigger cities. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, there's always at least like, I would say at a minimum, like 20% of the crowd is always a Lakers. Like Lakers fans make up at least 20% of every road crowd, which is pretty wild. Like you don't, I'll say covering the Clippers, that was not the case. The snow, Jovan, how did you get good at public speaking? Well, thank you. I'm not even sure if I'm good at public speaking, but I guess I'm doing something right if we got about 400 people in here listening live. A lot of reps, like naturally. This it's funny because I've always had the interest in this, in doing something with the NBA and covering the NBA, but I'm mainly an introvert, so I don't really love talking to people, and I get tired from talking to people, like from an energy perspective. And this job is a lot of talking to people, so it is funny how I picked a job where I have to talk a lot. Now I'm constantly thinking and kind of talking to myself, which is kind of funny saying out loud, but I think for me, I mean, I started podcasting. I've had some form of my own podcast since like 2018. It just was on a much smaller scale. I wasn't doing YouTube. I wasn't doing video. So I've built the reps up, and then also started doing TV in 2018, built the reps up. So I think a big thing is just reps, and also talk to USC classes about once or twice a semester. So like that was kind of a big thing for me, of just talking to classrooms, and like, because this is obviously we're interacting, but we're not like face to face, or even on TV, you're just looking at a camera. Podcasting, typically you're looking at the screen, and you have your mic, but like talking to a class is actually anywhere from 20 to 100 people, and the spotlight's kind of on me as the speaker in those cases. So I think that all those things kind of combined have made me more comfortable, but I still, I think I have a ways to go in terms of where I want to get to as a public speaker and a podcaster, and just all that. Android Andreas staying in Sacramento until Sunday. Yes. Controversial man, do you feel the Lakers struggle with a scapegoat culture? I think it's a conversation for another time, probably, but the short end of it is yes. There's also a lot of palace intrigue and like a lot of media attention, so that naturally is going to create a scapegoat. But certainly with I think we've seen with Russ and with Darvin Ham, they both were big problems, and it's and people tried like have the revisionist history of, oh well, they got rid of Russ, and look, they didn't win a championship. It wasn't all Russ's fault. They still have some problems. And like, oh, they got rid of Darvin, they didn't win a championship. They still have some problems. And two things can be true. Those two like Russ could have been a terrible fit and had a terrible contract and not been worth that contract, and also not always had the best attitude and best mood. And the Lakers could have other problems outside of that. And Darvin Ham could have not been a great coach, could have made a lot of mistakes with the lineups and the rotation, and benching guys, and losing the buy-in of the locker room, losing the locker room over the second half of the season, having players call him out, having players not defend him. And the Lakers could still have problems outside of that. So that's where it gets into like the people love to play the blame game and point the finger at one person, but it's like in most cases there's a lot of blame to go around. But certainly those individual situations, Russ played a big part, Darvin played a big part, but again, that does not absolve front office and ownership from lack of trades, lack of investing in this group, or making mistakes in how they've invested in this group. And then obviously, LeBron is aging. AD, like they've had some injuries. Supporting cast has been up and down. So there's a lot of things that go into and then there's also external factors of Boston becomes this dominant team, and like OKC has all their picks and young guys, and like there's also external factors that are out of the Lakers' control that like they can't control what the rest of the league looks like. So that's my like 2-minute answer on all the scapegoat stuff. ASD123, how about Trevor? Is he also a reporter? I would pose that question to Trevor. I believe he has reported before. I view him slightly more as like an analyst than a reporter, and I've talked about that distinction before. The one distinction I make here is that when I'm talking about like the beat reporters are the people who are traveling to basically every home game, every practice, and like 30 plus road games. So that's a short list of people. You can technically throw Mike Trudell in there, though he works for the team. So there's also a little bit of a distinction there where he's partly a team employee. So I'm talking like independent media, ESPN, LA Times, Orange County Register, The Athletic. So there's 4 of us that go to basically 75 to 85% of the road games, all the playoff games, and then like all the home games, and every practice, every shoot around, etc. So that group is only 4 of us. And so that's when I was asked about the beat writer question, that's what I was responding to. So it was no shade at anybody, no, but there's only 4 of us technically. Okay. If I don't stop now, I am going to go all night, and I do have some more work to do before I get to bed here. So I am going to call it right now, but I will be back on Saturday night. Depending on how my day looks tomorrow, there's a chance I impulsively go live at some point in the afternoon. So I guess if you guys are around tomorrow afternoon, if you guys want me to go live tomorrow, let me know in the chat here. Maybe I go live in the 3 to 5 p.m. range. I'm probably going to go to dinner and have a nice dinner with some of the group that's out here. But outside of that, I got meetings and stuff during the day. But if you guys are interested in me going live tomorrow, let me know in the chat. I see definitely, bro. Yes, please. And maybe I can test out putting the invite into the stream and then having you guys start to come on and ask questions. Okay, people are saying yes, so I don't want to fully commit depending on how I feel tomorrow and how things go, but tentatively I will say I'm like 90% there. The chat's killing me. Android Andreas, yes, I'll have dinner with you. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank Charlie. If there's a trade, you could go live. Otherwise, you ought to take a break. LOL. I might. I'll say I'll probably be a shorter one, like 45 minutes to an hour, and I always say that. But I'll see how I feel tomorrow, and if I'm feeling up for it, I will do it. But I appreciate you guys saying don't force it. So we'll see. I just want to throw it out there, see what you guys thought. But I'll either be live tomorrow or I will be live again Saturday night, and then I will test out the inviting people on and bringing you guys on. But that'll do it for tonight's show. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, especially if you made it this far, and turn on channel notifications. Like this video. If you've not liked it yet, please do so, and then leave a comment below. And then for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Again, I will potentially be back Friday, late afternoon, early evening. If not, I will be back on Saturday. It's an early game. It's a 3 p.m. Pacific time tip. So we'll be going live at a normal time, probably somewhere in like the 7:30 to 8:30 range. So be on the lookout for that. And I will talk to you very soon.